Welcome to part 3 of my video series on the Doepfer polyphonic modules. Today we'll be looking at modulating filters, oscillator sync, and more. Here's a quick look at some of the passive modules I'm using to control the system. The quad switches on the right are used to control oscillator FM resonance, sync, and FM for filter 2. The faders in the middle control pulse width, resonance for both, and the envelope amount to the filters, and the switches on the far right are used to control the filter type coming out of filter 1. Let's have a listen to Doepfer's quad poly voltage controlled low pass filter. This 24 dB per octave low pass has 4 ins and outs, so is 4 identical parallel filters, perfect for our polyphonic patches. In my system, I call it filter number 2, and in this example we are listening to a PWM oscillator patched through the filter with the envelope controlling it as I manually increase resonance. I'm using a Synthworks passive fader module to pass a voltage on to the voltage controlled resonance module on the Doepfer, and it offers a number of different voltage control inputs, making it really easy to set up controllers. In order to be able to have multiple modulators controlling the low-pass filter, I'm using the A130 linear octal VCA and a couple of 2 HP mixers to blend in envelope, FM signals, and keyboard signals from the interface, and then I'm controlling the amount of those modules using passive fader modules from Synthworks. The little quad toggle switch module on the left-hand side lets me choose whether or not the audio output of oscillator 2 is headed into the low-pass filter for filter-controlled audio rate FM, or if it's headed back into VCO1 for sync purposes. I'm using a second group of toggle switches to choose whether or not I'm sending a voltage from a Synthworks fader or Audio 1's oscillator output into the CV for the Q control on my multimode filter. This allows me to get audio rate modulation of the resonance, and that's what we're listening to now. I'm increasing the resonance as we go, and the higher it gets, the more the FM will become apparent. Now we're listening to oscillator 2 performing audio rate frequency modulation of the A105-4 24 dB low pass filter. You're not restricted to using the same oscillator with the same filter channel, which can give you all kinds of crazy sounds. Quad VCO gives you a choice as to where the incoming modulations go for each oscillator. So using jumpers on the back, I've been able to set mine to either give me pulse width modulation or to give me FM modulation. So using the switches on the front, now I'm sending a manual voltage into oscillator 1, and using toggle switches on the left-hand side of my setup, I've got oscillator 2 coming into oscillator 1's sync in. So we're hearing the familiar sync sound. And now I'm just going to change up the output waveform of oscillator 1 using our crossfaders. And then once again, you'll see me manually controlling a synthwork fader to control the frequency of oscillator 1, giving us that characteristic sync sweep. In the previous video, I showed how I'm able to use an ADSR to control pulse width modulation on oscillator 1. So by switching my switches to the frequency modulation position, now I'm sweeping the frequency of oscillator 1, but it is synced to oscillator 2, and so we're hearing that characteristic envelope controlled sync. The Doepfer Quad VCO has quite a gnarly, nice sync, and it can be set to be either hard sync, that's what we're hearing now, or soft sync with a jumper on the back. The basis of my big Doepfer Poly setup is that I have two separate voice channels, oscillators and filters, and then I'm blending them in two of the dual voltage controlled crossfaders. So through almost all of my patching and jamming around, I'm controlling the synthwork fader on the far right that sets the blend or the crossfade between those two distinct output channels. And that's what you're hearing me do now. Throughout many parts of this big poly patch, I've solved the control problem by setting up little switches or crossfaders that lets me choose whether or not a single fader voltage control is controlling 4 aspects of the module, or if I switch it over, I might have some kind of modulator like an envelope or something controlling it. This ends up meaning that there's a lot of cables and there's a lot of patching involved in trying to put this system together. But once you reach the point that you've got enough controllers that you can get at it without having to reach in and make a bunch of changes to it, it really almost becomes like a regular synth. It's not something that I'm always patching over and over again. And now, using one of Doepfer's older quad crossfader modules, I've set envelope 1 to control the dual voltage control crossfaders for the output of the synth, and so we'll hear that envelope crossing between oscillator filter combination 1 and oscillator filter combination 2. And the way that I've got it set up is I can go either way. I can invert the modulation so that my crossfade is happening in the other direction. I hope you've enjoyed my video series on the Doepfer Poly modules. Join me for the wrap-up video coming soon. Please consider joining my Patreon to help support me as I make more videos and create more wacky modular music. Thank you.